It's difficult to find a camera that does every single thing you need it to do right out of the box, but if you find a camera body that makes the most sense for your production needs and then build a rig around that camera, you can build it into the camera of your dreams. So today I'm going to show you how to build an affordable DSLR into your dream camera. It's important to first discuss what a good rig does. So before we can do that, let's define what a rig is in the first place. The technical definition for a rig is an apparatus, device, or piece of equipment designed for a particular purpose, and a camera rig is no different. So to build a rig is basically to redesign your camera for a specific purpose, a purpose that best fits your needs. And again, you start out with a camera that most fits your needs, but there's always going to be shortcomings that you can fix by simply building a rig around it and improving it. Not everyone needs the same rig. Sometimes you need it for different purposes. So in my case, I'm a documentary filmmaker. Primarily, that's what I do. I do freelance as well, but even the freelance stuff I do is all from a documentary perspective. And the first step, as I said, is to pick a camera body that checks off the most boxes for the best price and the most lightweight, especially for me. So with all that in mind, I decided to go with the Sony a7S II for multiple reasons. This camera has gotten a lot of praise, and it's for good reason. It has the best low light capability of any camera on the market. It shoots internal 4K on a full frame sensor. It's about as small and compact and lightweight as a prosumer level camera can get. And it captures Sony's wonderful S-Log picture profile and even comes with internal sensor steady shot stabilization. But even with all of those positives, even with all those great things that the Sony a7S II can do, it's not a perfect camera, and there's certain things that you have to try and make up for. So let's go over what I want to improve about this camera so we can build our rig around that. It has a small 3-inch monitor. There's only one audio input. It's so small that it feels fragile and unprotected. And besides one hot shoe mount, there is no room to build up or mount other features onto it. So how do we fix these problems? In order to build a proper rig, the first step is to pick a cage that makes you happy, something to build around it that allows you to build onto it as a rig. So this step is crucial because depending on what cage you pick, it'll give you a different set of screw mounts, a different set of cold shoes or hot shoes, and will give you the ability to kind of build that foundation for your rig. The best cage, in my opinion, for the Sony a7S II is the Tilta ES T17A handheld camera cage rig for the Sony a7 series. And this fits a lot of different alpha cameras. This cage protects your camera, adds mounts and screws and rails for building onto it, and provides multiple handheld capabilities that were previously impossible. The wooden handle grip is more than just aesthetically pleasing. It also gives me a second record button, which comes in handy once the rig is fully built. Everything this cage has to offer will be utilized in our build for practical reasons. So the next step for me was to add a monitor. That was the next most important thing after a cage that I wanted to add, because the Sony a7S II screen is small, it's not very bright, and it doesn't do a lot of the dynamic things that monitors can do now. And the best part about the monitor I chose is that it's not just a monitor, but it's a recorder. And this is the Atomos Ninja Flame with a 1 terabyte G Technology SSD. This is by far my favorite part of my rig because more than anything, this monitor gives me a clear and easy to see representation of the images I am capturing on location at the time. The difference between a 3-inch monitor and a 7-inch monitor may not sound like a lot, but trust me, once you use a 7-inch monitor on a DSLR, you will never go back. But just as important as the monitor's size and brightness are its features. The Atomos Ninja Flame connects the a7S II with a micro HDMI cable and properly displays an accurate S-Log color profile in a Rec 709 color space. But there are two ways the monitor helps me interpret my S-Log footage on the spot. You can either use the HDR setting to blend together multiple exposures, or you can use your own preloaded LUTs. Either way, this monitor works hard to help you kind of understand the range of exposures and color that you're truly capturing. This specific monitor allows me to shoot on a 1 terabyte SSD, which means I could shoot 4K pretty much all day. I have yet to run out of space during a day-long shoot. But this monitor also solves another one of the big problems of the Sony a7S II, which is that the camera inherently only has one audio input, and it's just one 3.5mm jack. It's not an XLR or anything fancy like that. So it's just your typical sort of DSLR audio jack. But as I said, if you're shooting a documentary, a lot of the times you're gonna wanna shoot with a wireless and a shotgun mic, and you can't do both of those from the A7S II as it is. So the nice thing about this monitor is that it actually adds a second channel of audio in the way of another 3.5mm jack. And if you plug one of the microphones into the camera as well as one into the Atomos recorder, you can actually record on two separate channels. So you're not recording one mono channel with two different microphones. You're actually recording two separate channels of audio, which is huge. It adds a whole different dynamic to the Sony A7S II. So the question is, now that we have those two audio jacks, how do we take advantage of it? Well, I decided to take advantage of it by using both a shotgun mic on my rig as well as a wireless lav mic. I can confidently say that these two microphones work well together when following a documentary subject in almost any scenario. And thanks to these two audio inputs on my rig, I can now use two completely different types of microphones, both with their own specific purpose. Now I can capture my subject's speech as well as natural sound from the surrounding environment. The next step in building this rig is we have to find a lens that makes us happy, a lens that shoots the quality of image that we sort of ideally have in our heads. And this could be a video unto itself. There are so many lenses out there that fit either with a Canon adapter or natively to the Sony E-mount that would produce an incredible image. It is a little bit harder to find a full frame lens that's not too expensive and fits on the Sony E. So I actually went sort of natively with Sony, stayed in the Sony family, and ended up getting the Sony G-Master 24-70 f2.8 lens. In short, this lens covers the camera's enormous full frame and can cover all the focal lengths I need for doc film shooting, from a wide landscape shot to interview and portrait shots. Also, it shoots at a constant f2.8 at all focal lengths, which means I can get great bokeh no matter what focal length I decide to shoot at. And since it's a Sony lens, and by using it you're staying inside that Sony family, you get to use the autofocus features and capabilities that the entire G-Master lens series provides. I can honestly say, after using this rig for a year and this lens for almost 2 years now, you will not regret picking up this 24-70. The images that it produces are awesome, but it's also so dynamic from 24-70. And keep in mind that that 24 is a full frame 24, so it's pretty wide. I haven't yet used the 16-35 of the G-Master series. I plan on using that later, but for now, this 24-70, especially with a full frame, has covered everything I need it to. The last step of building up this rig is to add a professional matte box. This matte box functions as a great way to keep glare from production lights as well as sunlight. But to be honest, my favorite reason to keep this matte box on my rig is to protect my lens at all times. This protection makes me a lot less nervous to drop my camera or have it slide off from a tripod and directly damage the value of it. I specifically added this matte box for two reasons. The first being that my camera cage is Tilta and it has lasted for a very long time. It's very durable, and so I knew Tilta was a reliable brand, not just from my experience, but from others. And on top of that, this Tilta matte box also is made of carbon fiber. And that means not only is it strong, but more importantly, it's light. When you add something this big on the end of a camera rig that's already, pretty significant in weight with the huge Atomos monitor that's on the back of it, you don't want to then add, twice as much weight with the matte box. So I decided to go with this because it's durable, but it's also lightweight. And that is officially the last step. Congratulations, we have officially built a rig. If we go back and look at what we've done, we can now say we have an enormous display monitor, multiple channels of audio inputs, 4K ProRes capabilities, multiple record buttons, multiple handheld options, two different but equally important microphones, a sturdy protective shell around our camera, an autofocus 4K capable lens for a full frame, a lens protecting matte box, And on top of all of that, we still have room to keep building if we wanted to. We have fully maxed out the capabilities for our small DSLR. And the best part is, this is what the rig looks like when it's completely built up, but we now have the ability to build it differently for different occasions. So you don't necessarily need to keep this built whenever you use this camera. I mean, you can use it in a bunch of different scenarios for different reasons, and that's the most important thing that you can take away from this video is building and tearing down this rig is all about adapting it for kind of specific situations. And this rig is so compartmentalized that we can kind of just break it up and decide what we want to build it into for a specific purpose. This is made to change. It's made to adapt. That's the most important thing your rig can do, is adapt. And the last thing I'll add about building up this rig is that it's not cheap, and that's an important thing to consider while building your rig. The reason I built it though is because I could start cheap when I had enough money to buy the camera in full itself, and then as I got different jobs, I added one component after the other. And that's a really important point because people often think that they need to start off with a red and a red body and Zeiss lenses, and that's not necessarily the case. If you do it this way, you can slowly build up as you go, pay for it one step at a time, and eventually you have a camera that stacks up to almost any camera on the market, at least in my opinion. And so that's something to consider while building this, is it does get expensive over time. This camera rig in itself altogether costs roughly about $8,500 at the time of making this video. With that money, you can buy a lot of different cameras, you can build a lot of different setups. But that brings me back to my main point, which is every rig is different and every rig needs a specific purpose for you. So it's up to you to decide how you want to spend that money, how you want to build it. But at least now you know there are options out there to build from a camera that you can afford. And that's the most important thing to take away. So thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to bringing you guys more content.